Okay. Now we're on live stream. Let me announce to the folks that might be watching this in the future that we're starting our Under Milkwood reading today. And I'm actually going to put the text from Under Milkwood on the screen. And this is a version done at the Gutenberg, the Australian Gutenberg group, which I particularly like because I like the background color and the print. And then once I've done that, get that on the share screen, we will begin. Let's see how's this going to work. Da, 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 da. Hold on, where'd it go? Oh, well, rats. Sorry, I kind of messed up here a little bit. Let me back out of this. And let me go here and go. Sorry about my fumbling here. Ah, here it is. That's what I want. So let me try it again. Share screen there. Okay, so you should see the text. And I don't, this may not, well, let's see how we see the chat. That's our, does everybody know where they are in the chat?
We can get the chat.
Yeah, it comes up over it.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay, so take a look at where you're at because I'm going to hide it again. And I'm going to start reading from the full screen that I have. And you'll just see the Zoom part in a little rectangle up in the upper right-hand side. If that becomes annoying, just tell me and we'll switch to a different technique. Okay, so here we go. A Play for Voices by Dylan Thomas, 1954. Under Milkwood. Silence. First voice, very softly. To begin at the beginning, it is spring. Moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black. The cobble street silent, and the hunched courters and rabbits wood limping invisibly down to the slow black, crow black, fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are blind as moles. No, moles see fine tonight in the snouting velvet dingles. Or blind as Captain Cat, there in the muffled middle by the pump and the town clock. The shops in mourning, the welfare hall and widow's weeds, and all the people of the lulled and dumbfounded town are sleeping now. Hush, the babies are sleeping. The farmers, the fishers, the tradesmen and pensioners, cobbler, schoolteacher, postman and publican, the undertaker and the fancy woman, drunkard, dressmaker, preacher, policeman, webfoot, cockle woman, and the tidy wives. Young girls lie bedded soft or glide in their dreams, with rings and trousseau, brides mated by glowworms down the aisles of the organ-playing wood. The boys are dreaming wicked, or of the bucking ranches of the night and the jolly Rogered Sea, and the anthracite statues of the horses sleep in the fields, and the cows in the byres, and the dogs in the wet-nosed yards, and the cats nap in the slant corners, or the lopes lie, streaking and needling on the one cloud of the roofs. Next, please.
You can hear the dew falling and the hushed town breathing. Only your eyes are unclosed to see the black enfolded town fast and slow asleep. And you alone can hear the invisible starfall, the darkest before dawn, minutely dew-grazed stir of the black, dab-filled sea, where the Arethusa, the Curlew, and the Skylark, Zanzibar, Rhiannon, the Rover, the Cormorant, and the Star of Wales tilt and ride. Listen, it is night moving in the streets, the processional salt, slow musical wind in Coronation Street and Cockle Row. It is the grass growing on Largib Hill, dewfall, starfall, the sleep of birds in Milkwood. Listen, it is night in the chill, squat chapel, hymning in bonnet and brooch and bombazine black, butterfly choker and bootlace bow, coughing like nanny goats sucking min toes, 40 winking hallelujah, night in the 4 ale, quiet as a domino, in Oaky Milkman's floss like a mouse with gloves, in Dye Bread's bakery flying like black flour. It is tonight in Donkey Street, trotting silent with seaweed on its hooves along the cockled cobbles, past curtain fern pot, text and trinket, harmonium, holy dresser, watercolors done by hand, china dog, and rosy tin tea caddy. It is night neddying among the snuggeries of babies. Joe.
Look, it is night, dumbly, royally, winding through the coronation cherry trees, going through the graveyard of Bethesda, with winds gloved and folded and dew doffed, tumbling by the sailor's arms. Time passes. Listen, time passes. Come closer now. Only you can hear the houses sleeping in the streets in the slow, deep, salt and silent black bandaged night. Only you can see in the blinded bedrooms the combs and petticoats over the chairs, the jugs and basins, the glasses of teeth, thou shalt not on the wall, and the yellowing dicky bird watching pictures of the dead. Only you can hear and see behind the eyes of the sleepers the movements and countries and mazes and colors and dismays and rainbows and tunes and wishes and flight and fall and despairs and big seas of their dreams. From where you are, you can hear their dreams. Captain Cat, the retired blind sea captain asleep in his bunk in the seashell ship in the bottle, ship-shape, best cabin of the schooner, house dreams of Lois.
Second voice. Never such seas as any that swamped the decks of his SS Kidwelly, bellying over the bedclothes and jellyfish slippery, sucking him down salt deep into the davy, dock where the fish come biting out and nibble him down to his wishbone, and the long drowned nuzzle up to him. First round. Remember me, Captain? Captain Cat, you're Dancy Williams. First round. I lost my step in Nantucket. Second round. Do you see me, Captain? White bone talking. I'm Tom Fred the Donkey Man. We shared the same girl once. Her name was Mrs. Probert. Woman's voice. Rosie Probert, 33 Duck Lane. Come on up, boys, I'm dead. Third round. Hold me, Captain. I'm Jonah Jarvis. Come to a bad end. Very enjoyable. Next.
Fourth round. Alfred Pomeroy joins, sea lawyer, born in Mumbles, sung like a linnet, crowned you with a flagon, tattooed with mermaids, thirst like a dredger, died of blisters. First round. This skull at your ear hole is fifth round. Curly Bevan, tell my auntie it was me that pawned the Ormula clock. All right. Captain Cat. Aye, aye, Curly. Second round. Tell my missus, no, I never. Third round. I never done what she said. I never. Fourth round. Yes, they did. Fifth round. And who brings coconuts and shawls and parrots to my Gwen now? First round. How's it above? Second round. Is there rum and laver bread? Third round. Bosoms and Robins, 4th round. Concertinas, 5th round. Ebenezer's Bell, 1st round. Fighting and Onions, 2nd round. And Sparrows and Daisies, 3rd round. Tiddlers in a Jam Jar, 4th round. Buttermilk and Whippets, 5th round. Rockabye Baby, 1st round. Washing on the Line, 2nd round. And Old Girls in Their Snug, 3rd round. How's the Tenors in Dowley, 4th round. Who Milks the Cows in Maesgwyn, 5th round. When She Smiled, Is There Dimples, 1st round. What's the Smell of Parsley? Cat and Cat. Oh, my dead dears, 1st voice. From where you are, you can hear in Cockle Row in the spring, moonless night, Miss Price, dressmaker, and sweet shopkeeper dream of. Next, please.
Okay, who is next? I cannot see the chat, so.
It's Joan, Bill, or Duncan. It's Joan.
Oh, Joan's
She there?
microphone wasn't working, unfortunately.
Okay.
Okay,
So then
so
it's Donna after Joan.
okay,
Okay.
and my key is Her Lover, tall as a town clock tower.
Mhm.
Samson Syrup, Gold Mane.
No, it's Donna's read.
Donna's. Okay, great.
Sorry, Duncan.
No.
Oh, I thought you were,
I'm
I thought you were
flying
picking
blind.
up. Okay, back to second voice. Dream of her lover, tall as the town clock tower. Samson syrup, gold maned, whacking tide and piping hot. Thunderbolt based and barnacle breasted, flailing up the cockles with his eyes like blow lamps, and scooping low over her lonely, loving, hot watered bottled body. Mr. Edwards, I fawn we Price, Miss Price, Mr. Mog Edwards, Mr. Edwards. I'm a draper mad with love. I love you more than all the flannelette and calico, Candlewick, dimity, crash and merino, tussore, cretonne, crepon, muslin, poplin, tickling and twill in the whole cloth hall of the world. I've come to take you away to my emporium on the hill, where the change hums on wires. Throw away your little bed socks and your Welsh wool knitted jacket. I will warm the sheets like an electric toaster. I will lie by your side like the Sunday roast. Miss Price, I will knit you a wallet of forget-me-not blue for the money to be comfy. I will warm your heart by the fire so that you can slip it under your vest when the shop is closed. Mr. Edwards, my Fanwy, before the mice gnaw at your bottom drawer, will you say, Miss Price, yes, Mog, yes, Mog, yes, 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 Mr. Edwards, and all the bells of the tills of the town shall ring for our wedding. There is noise of money tills and chapel bells. First voice, come now, drift up the dark, come up the drifting sea dark street now in the dark night, seesawing like the sea, to the Bible black airless attic over Jack Black the cobbler's shop, where alone and savagely Jack Black sleeps in a nightshirt tied to his ankles with elastic and dreams of, second voice, chasing the naughty couples down the grass green gooseberry double bed of the wood, logging the toss pots in the spit and sawdust, driving out the bare bold girls from their sixpenny hops of his nightmares.
Okay, it's me. Are you finished, Donna?
Yes, thank you, Anne.
Jack Black loudly. Ah, Evie. Ah, Evie. Evans the dead, the undertaker. Evans the dead, laughs high and aloud in his sleep, and curls up his toes as he sees, upon waking 50 years ago, snow lie deep on the goose field behind the sleeping house. And he runs out into the field where his mother is making Welsh cakes in the snow, and steals a fistful of snowflakes and currants, and climbs back to bed to eat them cold and swish under the warm white clothes, while his mother dances in the snow kitchen, crying out for her lost currants. And in the little pink-eyed cottage next to the undertaker's lie alone the 17 snoring gentle stone of Mr. Waldo, rabbit catcher, barber, herbalist, cat doctor, quack, his fat pink hands, palms up over the edge of his patchwork quilt, his black boots neat and tidy in the washing basin, his bowler on a nail above the bed, a milk stout and a slice of cold bread pudding under the pillow, and dripping in the dark, he dreams of mother. This little piggy went to market, this little piggy stayed at home. This little piggy had roast beef, this little piggy had none, and this little piggy went, little boy, wee, 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 wee. Mother all the way home too. Wife screaming, Waldo, Waldo. Mr. Waldo, yes, Blodwin, love. Wife, oh, what'll the neighbours say when the neighbours, first neighbour, poor Mrs. Waldo. Second neighbour, what she puts up with. First neighbour, should never have married. Second neighbour, if she didn't had to. First neighbour, same as her mother. Second neighbour, there's a husband for you. First neighbour, bad as his father. Second neighbour, and you know where he ended. First neighbour, up in the asylum. Second neighbour, crying for his mare. First neighbour, every Saturday. Second neighbour, he hasn't got a leg. Now, Tom.
First neighbour and carrying on. With that Mrs. Beatty Morris up in the quarry and seen her baby. It's got his nose. Oh, it makes my heart bleed. And what he'll do for drink. He told the pianola and her sewing machine falling in the gutter, talking to the lamppost, using language, singing in the W. Poor Mrs. Waldo. Wife, tearfully, oh, Waldo, Waldo. Mr. Waldo, hush, love, hush. I'm widower Waldo now. Mother screaming, Waldo, Waldo. Little boy, yes, our ma'am. Mother, oh, what will the neighbours say? What will the neighbours? Third neighbour, black as a chimney, ringing doorbells, breaking windows, making mud pies, stealing currants, chalking words, saw him in the bushes playing muchins, send him to bed without any supper, give him Senepods and lock him in the dark, off to the reformatory, learn him with a slipper on his beat TM. Another mother screaming, Waldo, Waldo, what are you doing with our Matty? Little boy, give us a kiss, Matty Richards. Little girl, give us a penny then. Mr. Waldo, I only got half a halfpenny. Next.
First woman, lips is a penny. Preacher, will you take this woman, Matty Richards? Second woman, Dulcie Prothero. Third woman, Effie Bevan. Fourth woman, Lil the Glue Pot. Fifth woman, Mrs. Flusher. Wife, Blodwin Bowen. Preacher, to be your awful wedded wife? Little boy screaming, no, no, no. First voice, now in her iceberg white, holily laundered crinoline nightgown under virtuous polar sheets, in her spruced and scoured dust-defying bedroom in Trig and Trim Bayview, a house for paying guests at the top of the town, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, widow, twice of Mr. Ogmore, linoleum, retired, and Mr. Pritchard, failed bookmaker, who, maddened by besumming, swaddling, and scrubbing, the voice of the vacuum cleaner and the fume of polish, ironically swallowed disinfectant, fidgets in her rinsed sleep, wakes in a dream, and nudges in the ribs Dead Mr. Ogmore, dead Mr. Pritchard, ghostly on either side. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. Mr. Ogmore, Mr. Pritchard, it's time to inhale your balsam. Mr. Ogmore. Oh, Mrs. Ogmore. Mr. Pritchard. Oh, Mrs. Pritchard. Mrs. Pritchard. Soon it will be time to get up. Tell me your tasks in order. Mr. Ogmore. I must put my pajamas in the drawer marked pajamas. Mr. Pritchard. I must take my cold bath, which is good for me. Mr. Ogmore. I must wear my flannel band to ward off sciatica. Mr. Pritchard. I must dress behind the curtain and put on my apron. Mr. Ogmore. I must blow my nose. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. In the garden, if you please. Mr. Ogmore. And a piece of tissue paper, which I afterwards burn. Mr. Pritchard. I must take my salts, which are nature's friend. Mr. Ogmore. I must boil the drinking water because of germs. Mr. Pritchard. I must take my herb tea, which is free from tannin. Mr. Ogmore. And have a charcoal biscuit, which is good for me. Mr. Pritchard. I may smoke one pipe of asthma mixture. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. In the woodshed, if you please. Mr. Pritchard. And dust the parlor and spray the canary. Mr. Ogmore. I must put on rubber gloves and search the peak for fleas. Mr. Pritchard. I must dust the blinds and then I must raise them. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. And before you let the sun in, mind it wipes its shoes. Anne, please.
First voice in Butcher Bainon's Gossamer Bainon daughter, school teacher, dreaming deep, daintily ferrets under a fluttering hummock of chicken's feathers in a slaughterhouse that has chintz curtains and a three-piece suit, and finds with no surprise a small, rough, ready man with a bushy tail winking in a paper carrier. Gossamer Beyond. At last, my love. First voice. Sighs Gossamer Bainon. And the bushy tail wags rude and ginger. The organ Morgan. Help, second voice cries. Organ Morgan, the organist in his dream. Organ Morgan. There is a perturbation and music in Coronation Street. All the spouses are honking like geese, and the baby's singing opera. P.C. Attila Reese has got his truncheon out and is playing cadenzas by the pump. The cows from Sunday Meadow ring like reindeer, and on the roof of Handel Villa see the women's welfare hoofing bloomered in the moon. The first voice. At the sea end of town, Mr. and Mrs. Floyd, the Cocklers, are sleeping as quiet as death, side by wrinkled side, toothless, salt and brown, like two old kippers in a box. And high above, in Salt Lake Farm, Mr. Utah Watkins counts all night the white-faced sheep as they leap the fences on the hill, smiling and knitting and bleeding, just like Mrs. Utah Watkins. Next.
Is it me?
Yes.
Okay. Utah Watkins, yawning. 34, 35, 36, 48, 89. Mrs. Utah Watkins bleating. Knit one, slip one, knit two together, pass the slip stitch over. First voice. Aukie Milkman, drowned asleep in Cockle Street, is emptying his churns in the dewy river. Aukie Milkman, whispering, regardless of expense. First voice. Weeping like a funeral. Second voice. Jerry Owen next door lifts a tankard to his lips, but nothing flows out of it. He shakes the tankard. It turns into a fish. He drinks the fish. First voice. P.C. Attila Rees lumps out of bed, dead to the dark and still foghorning. and drags out his helmet from under the bed. But deep in the backyard lockup of his sleep, a mean voice murmurs, a voice murmuring, "Be sorry for this in the morning." First voice. He heave-hoes back to bed. His helmet swashes in the dark. Second voice. Willy-nilly postman, asleep up the street, walks 14 miles to deliver the post as he does every day of the night. And the rats-a-tats hard and sharp on Mrs. Willy-nilly. Mrs. Willy-nilly. "Don't spank me, please, teacher." Second voice. Whispers his wife at his side that every night of her married life she's been late for school. First voice. Send back sailors. Over the tap room and the sailor's arms hugs his damp pillow, whose secret name is Gossamer Bainon. A mogul catches Lily Smalls in the wash house. Lily Smalls. "Oh, you old mogul." Second voice. Mrs. Rose Cottage's eldest, May, peels off her pink and white skin in a furnace, in a tower, in a cave, in a waterfall, in a wood, and waits there raw as an onion for Mr. Right to leap up the burning tall hollow splashes of leaves like a brilliantine trout. Next, please.
May Rose Cottage, very close and softly drawing out the words, "Call me Dolores," like they do in the stories. First voice. Alone until she dies, Bessie Bighead, hired help, born in the workhouse, smelling of the cowshed, snores bass and gruff on a couch of straw in the loft in Salt Lake Farm, and picks a posy of daisies in Sunday Meadow to put on the grave of Gomer Owen, who kissed her once by the pigsty when she wasn't looking, and never kissed her again, although she was looking all the time. And the inspectors of cruelty fly down into Mrs. Butcher Bainon's dream to persecute Mr. Bainon for selling. Butcher Bainon, "Owl meat, dog's eyes, man chop." Second voice. Mr. Bainon in Butcher's bloodied apron, spring heels down Coronation Street, a finger not his own in his mouth. Straight-faced in his cunning sleep, he pulls the legs of his dreams, and Butcher Bainon, hunting on pigback, shoots down the wild giblets. Organ Morgan, high and lofty, "Help!" Gossamer Bainon, softly, "My foxy darling." First voice. Now behind the eyes and secrets of the dreamers in the street, rocked to sleep by the sea, see the second voice. Tidbits and topsy-turvies, bobs and button tops, bags and bones, ashen rind and dandruff, and nail parings, saliva and snowflakes, and molted feathers of dreams, the wrecks and sprats and shells and fish bones, whale juice and moonshine, and small salt fry dished up by the hidden sea. Joe.
First voice. The owls are hunting. Look! Over Bethsaida gravestones, one hoots and swoops and catches a mouse by Hannah Ree's beloved wife. And in Coronation Street, which you alone can see, it is so dark, under the chapel in the skies, the Reverend Eli Jenkins, poet, preacher, turns in his sleep towards dawn, sleep, and dreams of Reverend Eli Jenkins, Ested Fodal. Second voice, he intricately rhymes to the music of the pipe and pibgorn, and all night long in his druid's seedy night tie in a beer tent black with parks. First voice, Mr. Pug, schoolmaster, fathoms asleep, pretends to be sleeping, spies Foxy round the droop of his nightcap and psst, whistles up. Mr. Pug, murder. First voice, Mrs. Ogden Morgan, groceress, coiled grey like a dormouse, her paws to her ears, conjures Mrs. Ogden Morgan, silence. Second voice, she sleeps, very dulcet in a cove of wool, and trumpeting Organ Morgan at her side, Snores now louder than the spider. Lois.
First voice. Marianne Sailors dreams of. Marianne Sailors, the Garden of Eden. First voice. She comes in her smock frock and clogs. Marianne Sailors, away from the cool scrubbed, cobbled kitchen with the Sunday school pictures on the whitewashed wall and the farmer's almanac hung above the settle and the sides of bacon on the ceiling hooks, and goes down the cockle-shell paths of that apple pie kitchen garden, ducking under the Jippo's clothes pegs, catching her apron in the black currant bushes, past bean rows and onion bed and tomatoes ripening on the wall, towards the old man playing the harmonium in the orchard, and sits down on the grass at his side and shells the green peas that grow up through the lap of her frock that brushes the dew. Next, please.
First voice. In Donkey Street, so furred with sleep, Die Bread, Polly Garter, no good boyo, and Lord Cutglass sigh before the dawn that is about to be, and dream of, Die Bread, harems, Polly Garter, babies, no good boyo, nothing, Lord Cutglass, tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. First voice, time passes. Listen, time passes. An owl flies home past Bethesda to a chapel in an oak, and the dawn inches up, one distant bell note faintly reverberating. First voice, stand on this hill. This is Flarigib Hill, old as the hills, high, cool, and green, and from this small circle of stones, made not by Druids, but by Mrs. Boynton's Billy, you can see all the town below you, sleeping in the first of the dawn. You can hear the lovesick wood pigeons mooning in bed. A dog barks in his sleep, farmyards away. The town ripples like a lake in the waking haze. Next, please.
Voice of a guidebook. Less than 500 souls inhabit the 3 quaint streets and the few narrow by-lanes and scattered farmsteads that constitute this small decaying watering place, which may indeed be called a backwater of life without disrespect to its natives, who possess to this day a salty individuality of their own. The main street, Coronation Street, consists for the most part of humble 2-storied houses, many of which attempt to achieve some measure of gaiety by printing themselves out in crude colors and by the liberal use of pinkwash, though there are remaining a few 18th century houses of more pretension, if on the whole in a sad state of disrepair. Though there is little to attract the hill climber, the health seeker, the sportsman, or the week-ending motorist, the contemplative may, if sufficiently attracted to spare it some leisurely hours, find in its cobbled streets and its little fishing harbour, in its several curious customs, and in the conversation of its local characters, some of that picturesque sense of the past so frequently lacking in towns and villages, which have kept more abreast of the times. The River Dowie is said to abound in trout, but is much poached. The one place of worship, with its neglected graveyard, is of no architectural interest. A cock crows. First voice. The principality of the sky lightens now over our green hill into spring morning, larked and crowed and belling, slow bell notes. First voice. Who pulls the town hall bell rope but blind Captain Cat? One by one the sleepers are wrung out of sleep this one morning as every morning, and soon you shall see the chimneys slow up flying snow as Captain Cat, in sailor's cap and sea boots, announces today with his loud get out of bed bell. Second voice. The Reverend Eli Jenkins in Bethesda House gropes out of bed into his preacher's black, combs back his bard's white hair, forgets to wash, pads barefoot downstairs, opens the front door, stands in the doorway, and looking out at the day and up at the eternal hill, and hearing the sea break and the gab of birds, remembers his own verses and tells them softly to empty Coronation Street that is rising and raising its blinds. Reverend Eli Jenkins, dear Goalia, I know there are towns lovelier than ours, and fairer hills and loftier far, and groves more full of flowers, and boskier woods more blithe with spring, and bright with birds adorning, and sweeter bards than I to sing their praise this beauteous morning. Next, please.
By Cadder Idris, tempest torn, or mole vid free glory, carned Llewellyn beauty born, Plinlinium old in story, by mountains where King Arthur dreams, by Penmaen Morford defiant, Lagergrub hill and molehill seem a picnic to a giant, by Saudi Sini Dovidi, Edwi Eden Aled on, Taff and Towie broad and free, Ni Flaniant with its waterfall, Clairwen, Claidu, Dulis, Do, Hilly, Gwilly, or Greet, Ned. Small is our river, dewy lord, a baby on a rushy bed. By Carrick, Senman, king of time, our heron head is only a bit of stone with seaweed spread, where gulls come to be lonely. A tiny dingle is Milkwood, by Bolden Grove, neath Grungar. But let me choose, and oh, I should love all my life and longer, to stroll among our trees and stray, in Goosey Gog Lane and Donkey Down, and hear the dewies sing all day, and never, never leave the town. The Reverend Jenkins closes the front door. His morning service is over. Tom.
First voice. Now woken at last by the out-of-bed sleepyhead, Polly put the kettle on. Town hall bell. Lily Smalls, Mrs. Bynan's treasure, comes downstairs from a dream of royalty, who all night long went larking with her full of sauce in the Milkwood dark, and puts the kettle on the Primus ring in Mrs. Bynan's kitchen, and looks at herself in Mrs. Bynan's shaving glass over the sink, and sees, oh, there's a face. Where do you get that hair from? Got it from an old tomcat. Give it back then, love. Oh, there's a perm. Where you get that nose from, Lily? Got it from my father, silly. You got it on upside down. Oh, there's a conch. Look at your complexion. Oh no, you look. Needs a bit of makeup, needs a veil. Oh, there's glamour. Where you get that smile, Lil? Never you mind, girl. Nobody loves you. That's what you think. Who is it loves you? Shan't tell. Come on, Lily. Cross your heart then. Cross my heart. First voice, and very softly, her lips almost touching her reflection, she breathes the name and clouds the shaving glass. Mrs. Bynan loudly from above. Lily! Lily Smalls loudly. Yes, Mum. Mrs. Bynan, where's my tea, girl? Lily Small softly. Where do you think? In the cat box. Loudly. Coming up, Mum. First voice. Mr. Pugh in the schoolhouse opposite takes up the morning tea to Mrs. Pugh and whispers on the stairs. Mr. Pugh, here's your arsenic, dear, and your weed killer biscuit. I throttled your parakeet. I've spat in the vases. I put cheese in the mouse holes. Here's your nice tea, dear. Mrs. Pugh, too much sugar. Mr. Pugh, you haven't tasted it yet, dear. Mrs. Pugh, too much milk then. Has Mr. Jenkins said his poetry? Mr. Pugh, yes, dear. Mrs. Pugh, Then it's time to get up. Give me my glasses. No, not my reading glasses. I want to look out. I want to see. Next.
Second voice. Lily Smalls, the treasure, down on her red knees, washing the front step. Mrs. Pugh. She tucked her dress in her bloomers. Oh, the baggage. I'll try that. Oh, the baggage. Second voice. PC Attila Rees, Oxbroad, barge booted, stamping out of handcuff house in a heavy beef red huff, black browed under his damp helmet. Mrs. Pugh. He's going to arrest Polly Gardner. Mark my words. Mr. Pugh. What for, dear? Mrs. Pugh. For having babies. Second voice. And lumbering down towards the strand to see that the sea is still there. First voice. Marianne Sailors, opening her bedroom window above the tap room and calling out to the heavens. Marianne Sailors. I'm 85 years, 3 months, and a day. Mrs. Pugh. I will say this for her. She never makes a mistake. First voice. Organ Morgan at his bedroom window, playing chords on the sill to the morning fishwife gulls who, heckling over Donkey Street, observe. Dye bread. Me, dye bread, hurrying to the bakery, pushing in my shirt tails, buttoning my waistcoat. Ping goes a button. Why can't they sew them? No time for breakfast. Nothing for breakfast. There's wives for you. Mrs. Dye Bread 1. Me, Mrs. Dye Bread 1, Captain shawled in no old corset. Nice to be comfy, nice to be nice. Clogging on the cobbles to stir up a neighbor. Oh, Mrs. Sarah, can you spare a loaf, love? Dye Bread forgot the bread. There's a lovely morning. How's your boils this morning? Isn't that good news now? It's a change to sit down. Ta, Mrs. Sarah. Dye Bread 2. Me, Mrs. Dye Bread 2, gypsy to kill in a silky scarlet petticoat above my knees, dirty pretty knees, to see my body through my petticoat, brown as a berry, high-heeled shoes with one heel missing, tortoise-shelled comb in my bright black slinky hair, nothing else at all but a daub of scent, rolling gaudy at the doorway, tell your fortune in the tea leaves, scowling at the sunshine, lighting up my pipe. Lord Cutglass. Me, Lord Cutglass, in an old frock coat belonged to Eli Jenkins, and a pair of postman's trousers from Bethesda Jumble, running out of doors to empty slops. Mind there, Rover, and then running in again. Tick-tock. Next, please, Anne.
Let's see. Okay. Say no good boy, Boyd. Me, no good Boyd. Up to no good in the wash house. Miss Price. Me, Miss Price, is in my pretty print housecoat, deft at the clothesline, natty as a Jenny Wren. Then pit-pat back to my egg in its cozy. My crisp toast fingers, my homemade plum and butter pat. Polly Garter. Me, Polly Garter, under the washing line, giving the breast in the garden to my bonny new baby. Nothing grows in our garden, only washing and babies. And where's their fathers? Where their fathers live, my love, over the hills and far away. You're looking up at me now. I know what you're thinking, you poor little milky creature. You're thinking you're no better than you should be, Polly, and that's good enough for me. Oh, isn't life a terrible thing? Thank God. So then the first voice. Now frying pan spit, kettles and cats purr in the kitchen. The town smells of seaweed and breakfast all the way down from Bayview, where Mrs. Ogmore Pitchard, in smock and turban, big besomed to engage the dust, picks at her starchless bread and sips lemon rind tea, to Bottom Cottage, where Mr. Waldo, in bowler and bib, gobbles his bubble and squeak and kippers and swigs from the sauce bottle. Marianne Sailors is next. Praises the Lord who made the porridge. Next.
Mr. Pugh. Mr. Pugh remembers ground glass as he juggles his omelet. First voice. Mrs. Pugh. Mrs. Pugh nags the salt cellar. First voice. Willy-nilly postman. willy-nilly. Downs his last bucket of black brackish tea and rumbles out bandied to the clucking back where the hens twitch and grieve for their tea-soaked sops. First voice, Mrs. Willy-nilly. Mrs. Willy-nilly, full of tea to her double chin, brim broods and bubbles over her coven of kettles on the hissing hot range, always ready to steam open the mail. First voice, the Reverend Eli Jenkins. Reverend Eli Jenkins finds a rhyme and dips his pen in his cocoa. First voice, Lord Cutglass in his ticking kitchen. Lord Cutglass scampers from clock to clock, a bunch of clock keys in one hand, the fish head in the other. First voice, Captain Cat in his gallery. Blind and five-fingered savors his sea fry. First voice, Mr. and Mrs. Cherry Owen in their Donkey Street room that is bedroom, parlor, kitchen, and scullery, sit down to last night's supper of onions boiled in their overcoats and broth of spuds and bacon rind and leeks and bones. Mrs. Cherry Owen. See that smudge on the wall by the picture of Auntie Blossom? That's where you threw the sago. Cherry Owen laughs with delight. Mrs. Cherry Owen. You only missed me by an inch. Cherry Owen. I always miss Auntie Blossom, too. Mrs. Cherry Owen. Remember last night? In you reeled my boy, as drunk as a deacon in a big wet bucket and a fish frail full of stout, and you looked at me and you said, God has come home. You said. And then over the bucket you went sprawling and bawling, and the floor was all flagons and eels. Cherry Owen. Was I wounded? Mrs. Cherry Owen. Then you took off your trousers and you said, does anyone want to fight? Oh, you old baboon. Cherry Owen. Give me a kiss. Mrs. Cherry Owen. And then you sang Bread of Heaven, tenor and bass. Cherry Owen. I always sing Bread of Heaven. Mrs. Cherry Owen. And then you did a little dance on the table. I did. Mrs. Cherry Owen. Drop dead. And then what did I do? Mrs. Cherry Owen. Then you cried like a baby and said you were a poor drunk orphan with nowhere to go but the grave. And Cherry Owen. And what did I do next, my dear? Mrs. Cherry Owen. Then you danced on the table all over again and said you were King Solomon Owen and I was your Mrs. Sheba. Cherry Owen softly. And then? Mrs. Cherry Owen. And then I got you into bed and you snored all night like a brewery. Mr. and Mrs. Cherry Owen laughed delightedly together. Next, please.
First voice. From Baden Butcher's in Coronation Street, the smell of fried liver sidles out with onions on its breath. And listen, in the dark breakfast room behind the shop, Mr. and Mrs. Bainon, waited upon by their treasures, enjoy between bites their every morning hullabaloo, and Mrs. Bainon slips the gristly bits under the tassel tablecloth to her fat cat. The cat purrs. Mrs. Bainon. She likes the liver, Ben. Mr. Bainon. She ought to, Bess. It's her brother's. Mrs. Bainon screaming. Did you hear that, Lily? Lily Smalls. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Bainon. We're eating pussycat. Lily Smalls. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Bainon. Oh, you cat butcher. Mr. Bainon. It was doctored, mind. Mrs. Bainon. Hysterical. What's that got to do with it? Mr. Bainon. Yesterday we had mole. Mrs. Bainon. Oh, Lily. Mr. Bainon. Monday otter, Tuesday shrews. Mrs. Bainon screams. Lily Smalls. Go on, Mrs. Bainon. He's the biggest liar in town. Mrs. Bainon. Don't you dare say that about Mr. Bainon. Lily Smalls. Everyone knows it, Mum. Mrs. Bainan. Mr. Bainan never tells a lie, do you, Ben? Mr. Bainan. No, Bess. And now I'm going out after the corgis with my little cleaver. Mrs. Bainan. Oh, Lily, Lily. Next, please.
First voice, up the street on the Sailors' Arms, Sinbad Sailors, grandson of Mary Ann Sailors, draws a pint in the sunlit bar. The ship's clock in the bar says 11:30. 11:30 is opening time. The hands of the clock have stayed still at 11:30 for 50 years. It is always opening time in the Sailors' Arms. Sinbad, here's to me, Sinbad. First voice, all over the town, babies and old men are cleaned and put into their broken prams and wheeled on to the sunlit cockled cobbles or out into the backyards under the dancing underclothes and left. A baby cries, old man, I want my pipe. And he wants his bottle. The school bell rings. First voice, noses are wiped, heads picked, hair combed, paws scrubbed, ears boxed, and the children shrilled off to school. Second voice, fishermen grumble to their nets. No good boyo. Goes out in the dinghy, Zanzibar, ships the oars, drifts slowly in the dappled bay, and lying on his back in the unbaled water among crabs' legs and tangled lines, looks up at the spring sky. No good boyo, softly, lazily. I don't know who's up there and I don't care. First voice, he turns his head and looks up at Lergib Hill and sees among the green lather trees the white houses of the strewn away farms, where farm boys whistle, dogs shout, cows low, but all too far away for him or you to hear. And in the town, the shops squeak open. Mr. Edwards, in butterfly collar and straw hat at the doorway of Manchester House, measures with his eye the dawdlers by for striped flannel shirts and shrouds and flowery blouses, and bellows to himself in the darkness behind his eye, I love Miss Price. Yes.
First voice, syrup is sold in the post office. A car drives to market full of fowls and a farmer. Milk churns stand at Coronation Corner like short silver policemen. And sitting at the open window of Schooner House, blind Captain Cat hears all the morning of the town. School bell in background, children's voices, the noise of children's feet on the cobbles. Captain Cat, softly to himself. Maggie Richards, Ricky Reese, Tommy Powell, our Sal, Little Gawain, Billy Swansea with the dog's voice, one of Mr. Waldo's, Nasty Humphrey, Jackie with a sniff. Where's Stinky Selby? And the boys from Taipat. Perhaps they got the rash again. A sudden cry among the children's voices. Captain Cat. Someone's hit Maggie Richards. 2-1, it's Billy Swansea. Never trust a boy who barks. Burst of yelping, crying, right again, it's Billy. First voice, and the children's voices cry away. Postman's rat-a-tat on the door, distant. Captain Cat, softly to himself. That's willy-nilly, knocking at Bayview. Rat-a-tat, very soft. The knocker's got a kid glove on. Who sent a letter to Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard? Rat-a-tat, distant again. Captain Cat, careful now. She swabs the front glassy. Every step's like a bar of soap. Mind your size 12s. That old Bessie would beeswax the lawn to make the birds slip. Next.
Willy-nilly. Morning, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. Good morning, postman. Willy-nilly. Here's a letter for you, with stamped and addressed envelope enclosed, all the way from Wolf Wells. A gentleman wants to study birds, and can he have accommodation for 2 weeks and a bath vegetarian? Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. No. Willy-nilly, persuasively. Oh, you wouldn't know he was in the house, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. He'd be out in the mornings at the bang of dawn with his bag of breadcrumbs and his little telescope, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, and come home at all hours covered with feathers. I don't want persons in my nice clean rooms breathing all over the chairs, willy-nilly. Cross my heart, he won't breathe, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, and putting their feet on my carpets and sneezing on my china and sleeping in my sheets, willy-nilly. He only wants a single bed, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. Door slams. Captain Cat softly. And back she goes to the kitchen to polish the potatoes. First voice. Captain Cat hears Willy-nilly's feet heavy on the distant cobbles. Captain Cat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's Mrs. Rose Cottage's. I can't find where it is now. It keeps moving up and down.
What's today? What's today?
That's Mrs. Rose Cottage. What's today? Today she gets a letter from her sister in Gorsles. How's the twins' teeth? He's stopping at schoolhouse, willy-nilly. Morning, Mrs. Pugh. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard won't have a gentleman in from Willis Wells because he'll sleep in her sheets. Mrs. Rose Cottage's sister and Gorsles twins have got to have them out. Mrs. Pugh. Give me the parcel. Willy-nilly. It's for Mr. Pugh, Mrs. Pugh. Mrs. Pugh. Never you mind. What's inside it? Willy-nilly. A book called Lives of the Great Prisoners. Captain Cat.
Poisoners.
Poisoners. Captain Cat. That's Manchester House. Next, please.
Willy-nilly. Morning, Mr. Edwards. Very small news. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard won't have birds in the house, and Mr. Pugh's bought a book now on how to do in Mrs. Pugh. Mr. Edwards. Have you got a letter from her? Willy-nilly. Miss Price loves you with all her heart. Smelling of lavender today. She's down to the last of the elderflower wine, but the quince jam's bearing up, and she's knitting roses on the doilies. Last week she sold 3 jars of boiled sweets, pound of humbugs, half a box of jelly babies, and 6 coloured photographs of Taraggub. Yours forever. Then 21 kisses. Mr. Edwards. Oh, willy-nilly, she's a ruby. Here's my letter. Put it into her hands now. Slow feet and cobbles, quicker feet approaching. Captain Cat. Mr. Waldo hurrying on to Sailor's Arms. Pint of stout with the egg in it. Footsteps stop softly. There's a letter for him. Willy-nilly. It's another paternity summons, Mr. Waldo. First voice. The quick footsteps hurry on along the cobbles and end up 3 steps to the Sailor's Arms. Mr. Waldo calling out. Quick, Sinbad, pint of stout and no egg in. First voice. People are moving now up and down the cobbled street. Captain Cat. All the women are out this morning in the sun. You can tell it's spring. There goes Mrs. Cherry. You can tell her by her trotters. Off she trots, new as a daisy. Who's that talking by the pump? Mrs. Floyd and Boyo talking flatfish. What can you talk about flatfish? There's Mrs. Diebread one, waltzing up the street like a jelly. Every time she shakes, it slap, slap, slap. Who's that? Mrs. Butcher Bainan with her pet black cat. It follows her everywhere, meow and all. There goes Mrs. 23, important. The sun gets up and goes down in her dewlap. When she shuts her eyes, it's night. High heels now, in the morning too. Mrs. Rose Cottage's eldest May, 17 and never been kissed, ho-ho, going young and milking under my window to the field with the nanny goats. She reminds me all the way. Can't hear what the women are gabbing around the pump. Same as ever. Who's having a baby? Who blacked whose eye? Seen Polly Garter giving her belly an airing. There should be a law. Seen Mrs. Bainan's new mauve jumper. It's her old grey jumper died. Who's dead? Who's dying? Here's a lovely day. Oh, the cost of soap flakes. Organ music distant. Next week.
Organ Morgan's at it early, you can tell it's spring. And he hears the noise of milk cans. Hockey milkman on his round. I will say this, his milk as fresh as the dew. Half dew it is, snuffle on. Hockey's watering the town. Somebody's coming. Now the voices round the pump can see somebody coming. Hush, there's a hush. You can tell by the noise of the hush. It's Polly Garter. Louder. Hello, Polly, who's there? Polly Garter. Oh. Me love, Captain Cat. That's Polly Garter, softly. Hello, Polly, my love. Can you hear the dumb goose hiss of the wives as they huddle and peck or flounce or waddle away? Who cuddled you when? Which of their gandering hobbies moaned in milkwood for your naughty mouthing arms and body like a wardrobe, love? Scrub the floors of the welfare hall for the mothers' union social dance. Your one mother won't wiggle her roly-poly bum or pat her fat little buttery foot in that wedding ringed holy tonight to the waltzing breadwinners, snatched from the cosy smoke of the sailor's arms, will grizzle and mope. A cock crows. Captain Cat. Too late, cock, too late, for the town's half over with its morning. The morning's busy at bees. Out background organ music. Next, please. Tom.
First voice, there's a clip-clop of horses on the sunny honeyed cobbles of the humming streets, hammering of horseshoes, gobble, quack and cackle, tom-tit twitter from the bird-ounce boughs, braying on donkey down, bread is baking, pigs are grunting, chop goes the butcher, milk churns bell, tills ring, sheep cough. Dogs shout, saws sing, oh, the spring whinny and the morning moo, the clog dancing farms. The gulls gab and rabble on the boat bobbing river and sea, and the cockles bubbling in the sand, scamper of sanderlings. Curl you cry, crow caw, pigeon coo, clock strike, bull bellow, and the ragged gabble of the Bear Garden School as the women scratch and babble in Mrs. Organ Morgan's general shop, where everything is sold, custard, buckets, henna, rat traps, shrimp nets, sugar, stamps, confetti, paraffin, hatchets, whistles. First woman, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, la-di-da, got a man in Bull's Wells, and he got a little telescope to look at birds. Willy-nilly said, remember her first husband, he didn't need a telescope. He looked at them undressing through the keyhole, and he used to shout, tally-ho, but Mr. Ogmore was a proper gentleman. Next.
First woman, even though he hanged his collie. Third woman, seen Mrs. Butcher Bain? Second woman, did Butcher Bainan put dogs in the mincer? First woman, go on, he's pulling her leg. Third woman, now don't you dare tell her that, there's a dear. Second woman, or she'll think he's trying to pull it off and eat it. Fourth woman, there's a nasty lot live here when you come to think. First woman, look at that no good boyo now. Second woman, too lazy to wipe his snout. Third woman, and going out fishing every day, and all he ever brought back was a Mrs. Samuels. First woman, been in the water a week. Second woman, and look at Okie Milkman's wife that nobody's ever seen. First woman, he keeps her in the cupboard with the empties. Third woman, they could dye bread with 2 wives. Second woman, one for the daytime and one for night. Fourth woman, men are brutes on the quiet. Third woman, and how's Organ Morgan, Mrs. Morgan? First woman, you look dead beat. Second woman, it's organ, all the time with him. Third woman, up every night until midnight, playing the organ. Mrs. Organ Morgan, oh, I'm a martyr to music. First voice, Outside, the sun springs down on the rough and tumbling town. It runs through the hedges of Goose Grog Lane, cuffing the birds to sing. Spring whips green down Cockle Row, and the shells ring out. I'll try it. Larga, this snip of a morning is wild fruit and warm. The trees, streets, fields, sands, and waters springing in the young sun. Second voice. Evans the Death presses hard with his black gloves on the coffin of his breast in case his heart jumps out. Evans the Death harshly. Where's your dignity? Lie down. Second voice. Spring stirs Gossamer Bainan, schoolmistress, like a spoon. Gossamer Bainan, tearfully. Oh, what can I do? I'll never be refined if I twitched. Second voice. Spring this strong morning foams in a flame in Black Jack as he cobbles a high-heeled shoe for Mrs. Diebread to the gypsy, but he hammers it sternly out. Black Jack to a hammer rhythm. There is no leg belonging to the foot that belongs to this shoe. Second voice. The sun and the green breeze ship Captain Cat sea memory again. Captain Cat. No, I'll take the mulatto, by God. Who's captain here? Parlez-vous, jig, madam? Second voice. Marianne Sailors says very softly to herself as she looks out at Larrabee Hill from the bedroom where she was born. Marianne Sailors loudly. It is spring in Larrabee, in the sun in my old age, and this is the chosen land. Choir of children's voices suddenly cries out on one high, glad, long, sighing note. Anne, please.
First voice. And in willy-nilly, the postman's dark and sizzling, damp tea-coated, misty pygmy kitchen, where the spitting kettles throb and hob on the range. Mrs. Willy-nilly steams open Mr. Mog Edwards' letter to Miss Methani Price and reads it aloud to Willy-nilly by the squint of the spring sun through the one sealed window running with tears, while the bedraggled hens at the back door whimper and snivel for the licorice bog black tea. Mrs. Willy-nilly from Manchester House, Slagreb, sole prop, Mr. Bog Edwards, date of 12, line dragger, haberdasher, master tailor, costumer for West End negligee, lingerie, tea gowns, evening dress, trousseau, layettes, also ready to wear for all occasions, economical outfitting from agricultural employment, our specialty, wardrobes bought. Among our satisfied customers, ministers of religion and JPs, fitting by appointment, advertising weekly in the Tull Bugle. Beloved Mafani Price, my bride in heaven. Mog Edwards. I love you until death do us part, and then we shall be together forever and ever. A new parcel of ribbons has come from Carmarthen today, all the colors in the rainbow. I wish I could tie a ribbon in your hair, a white one, but it cannot be. I dreamt last night you were all dripping wet and you sat on my lap as the Reverend Jenkins went down the street. I see you got a mermaid in your lap, he said, and he lifted his hat. He is a proper Christian, not like Cherry Owen, who said you should have thrown her back, he said. Business is very poorly. Polly Garter bought 2 garters with roses, but she never got stockings. So what is the use, I say? Mr. Waldrow tried to sell me a woman's nightie outsize, he said. He found it and we know where. I sold a packet of pins to Sinbad sailors to pick his teeth. If this goes on, I shall be in the workhouse. My heart is in your bosom and yours is in mine. God be with you always, Fanny Price, and keep you lovely for me in his heavenly mansion. I must stop now and remain your eternal Mog Edwards. Next.
Okay, I need a little direction here because I'm reading from a screen, I have no idea where we are.
Mrs. Willy-nilly
Well, I've got that part. I'm just talking about in terms of it's 2:16
We're
now.
we're about
We're
halfway
slightly
through.
over halfway.
Yeah.
Okay,
just a little
so
more than
is this,
halfway.
is this a good place to stop? I guess that's my actual
Yeah.
question.
So,
This is-
yeah.
Yeah.
In my
Okay.
edition, we're at page 60 of about 100.
Yeah, and in mine we're at page 49 of 84. So
Okay, very
55
good.
out of 90.
This is a good
Very
spot.
good.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, then let me do the stop share, and then I need to let me make sure I need this. That's what I want. Need compose, and then I need to paste. Okay, so I'll know where we are next time. Well, this is fun, I think.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
And do you notice the name of the place? The one that we can't pronounce. Look, it actually means bugger all. It's written backwards.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, backwards. Yeah.
And it's Claragub.
Pardon?
Claragub.
Claragum.
Claragub is how it's pronounced. Yeah.
Claragum.
The double L is pronounced as a C.
Ah,
That's a TL. Skla.
In Clondudno.
Clondudno.
Yes.
I didn't
Or you know the longest name place in the English language?
I know it's in Wales.
And that feels.
How would you like to spend a lifetime telling people that that's your hometown and having to pronounce it for everyone?
I once
bet.
passed through the station, the railway station there, and the name is spelt in full. Everywhere else it's just spelled Clonville.
And what does it mean? Does it have a meaning?
No, well, not that I'm aware of. I'm sure it has some meaning.
Yeah.
It probably means we're going to separate the natives from the outsiders by the ones who try to actually pronounce this name will know they're outsiders.
Well,
Yeah.
We just
being-
call it C or something like that.
Being Joyce readers, we understand the difference between the north side of Dublin and the south side. And in Wales, there's a difference between northern Wales and southern Wales.
Yes.
They don't like each other very much.
No.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. If you've ever seen the movie Pride, they play with that a little bit with the characters.
Yeah.
Who's in that movie, Dave?
Oh,
I haven't heard of it before.
No.
sit tight and keep talking. I'll go and get the case and show you. It's actually quite a good.
No, I don't have too much to say about what we read, except that it was lots of fun, and it kind of has me in a little bit of a giddy mood.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, blind cat knows everything that's going on by just listening, counting the steps, so who's getting mail, and the postman opens all the mail. And
That's right.
himself and his wife. It's so funny, like we hands over. And the stamped addressed envelope inside.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious. It's hilarious.
I was reading a little into the background, and apparently we have a sort of an unknown narrator who's inviting us as the audience in to listen to what's going on. But everybody in Taragub is asleep, and we're hearing their dreams.
Just their dreams.
And then they wake, and we can listen in to what they're getting up to during the course of the day. So it'd be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite character is Mr. Pugh.
Yeah.
He's absolutely the best. And I had read the whole thing over the weekend, and there's a very subtle reference to Dr. Crippen at one point that just cracked me up. I laughed out loud all by myself for a good 5 minutes.
I did like the book about the poisoners, all right.
Yeah, great
Poisoner's
poisoners.
Guide.
you know, you're planning to kill your wife. You do not hold a great poisoner.
You have to be careful who opens the post.
Yeah.
It's
I
a,
looked- I
a great,
Is in
great
our-
production, a great production with Richard Burton. If you want to watch it on YouTube or something, it's
Really?
Yeah.
it's really delightful.
Actually, that I have the reading of it
Yeah.
is in the Monday Book Club. I put the link in there.
Good.
Yeah.
I sent
But
the
it-
originals to Duncan, but for some reason they wouldn't play the ones with Dylan Thomas in it, which is very interesting.
Okay, yeah, it just wouldn't open for me. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it was the day, and I should probably try it again. But
But
I
it's
tried
on
it. I
YouTube.
tried it last weekend, and it's extremely funny because
Yeah,
you were talking about being giddy, Duncan. All the actors in this are extremely giddy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very funny.
But you'd have great fun performing this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's so super.
Donna, there's a bit of a pause here. This is the movie.
Okay.
And if you want
Right.
some Welsh flavor, it's actually, I mean, this is not totally off topic because it's about some gay people in London who are supporting the British coal miners' strike.
Oh,
Okay.
And it's actually good because the people in the coal miners' town don't really know gay people very well, but they're desperate. They're really trying to feed themselves. And these gay people in London sort of take the coal miners under their wing. And it is a true story. And where the
Yeah, and they fundraised.
They do. Who's that? Who's that?
Yeah.
that's Anne.
And
Yes,
I
they
did see that. I did see it. And they fundraised for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it was excellent.
It's quite a good movie. And the point is, one of the gay people who's living in London goes to this small town, which is in the coal mining town, which is in the south of Wales, and he's from the north of Wales, and they kind of give him a hard time at the beginning.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Dave. I'll look up that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's worth watching. I really like the movie.
great.
It's very reminiscent to me of Craignaquila, the Irish book about these people who it's sort of like Our Town in a way.
Yes.
It's all the people in a graveyard who
Mhm.
talk about who's coming and who's going. Who's next, who's getting buried. It's really hilarious.
And
But
the
I was
Spoon
gonna
River
say that-
anthology as well for Americans. I think it's Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River anthology, where people
Spoon River, right?
also tell their stories in poetry, and it's quite good too.
Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
going to say the same thing as Bill, that this reminds me of Our Town by Thornton Wilder. And in that play, they talk to each other and look back on the life they lived and wondered if they could have done things better. It's very nostalgic and
Mhm.
sentimental. This one also has that, gives that, there's laughter and of course, and all the details of what they're doing, but it has an overtone of or I would just say engages me on like an emotional level, looking at a life of dreams and
Mhm.
waking to the reality of your day.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
absolutely.
I love Rosie Probert with the two dead husbands.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
lacerating them all the time. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like what you said, Bill, about Craignaquila, which is essentially dead people sniping and backbiting with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Right, that's an Irish. That's a
It's an
Gaelic
Irish
novel,
book by
right?
Martin O'Kine.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually have a copy of
There
them.
have been two recent translations into English,
Mhm.
one of which is execrable. It's horrible. The other one's very good. But there's one that is just full of Americanisms and really slang. It's really, I think a horrid translation. But anyway,
I'm sure, Bill, you read it in the original Irish.
I did it one time. Yeah.
Very good.
Mm.
I've never read it. I must get it out and have a read.
Yeah.
Mhm. So does anybody know enough about Dylan Thomas to tell us where this fits in? I mean, I know it's probably his most well-known work,
Mm.
but in his writing career,
I read a bit of his biography. He Well, he starts this at a young age, and then he just keeps playing with it and rewriting it throughout his career. But he dies at age 40, and he dies in America, and
Yeah.
he was an alcoholic. He was a very serious alcoholic.
Right. Actually, I read a thing on this is probably a couple of years ago on his final days
Yeah.
in New York City. It was pretty sobering, shall we say?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The tavern where he died in actually didn't quite die there, but would have had he not been able to leave to go wherever, is the White Horse Tavern, and it's still there on 10th or 11th Avenue in the 40s and 50s.
Mm.
He was a mean drunk. And well, what else is I going to say? And this play was not well received, and Bill says the Richard Burton version, the film of it is very good, but it did not receive good reviews. And they think that maybe like Dylan's alcohol problems have superseded his his life as a poet. So it's really refreshing for us, I think, to look at the poetry and sympathize
I think you're
with the
right, Anne.
background.
He wasn't well received at the time, but I think there has been a sort of a revision of the views now, particularly in the UK. He reminds me sort of Brendan Behan in an Irish context.
Yeah.
Who was a similar type of personality who drank a lot, but clearly was an artist also, a poet and playwright.
He lived in a fabulous place on the shoreline in Wales. The house is great, and there's like a second-story deck looking out on the waters, and there's also a Dylan Thomas center in the city where he's from, and statuary to him.
So you visited?
No, it's online on his biography.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a life story done by, I think it's either BBC, one of the English television stations, but very interestingly, they do it backwards. They begin with his death, and they go back to his birth. So it ends with his birth, and it's a great way of showing all the factors that influenced other than the conventional coming forward, and disappointment after disappointment, and so on. So so they begin in that hotel, and they actually go to the hotel, and that's I must dig that out for next week and see if I can get at least a reference, and I'll put it up.
Okay.
It'd be great if we could find that.
And what's the name of the town where they lived, Kathleen and himself? It's the same as
Bill's got.
I can't remember. Let me look.
There's a similar town in Northern Ireland where they smuggled arms into in 1914.
Well, as I remember it,
Larne was the name. Laugharn.
Laugharne.
Yeah, it's pronounced Larne. And then he lived. He lived in London for a long time, in Chelsea, and he lived in Oxford, and he lived in, and he went to, he did a film in Iran, and he went to Donegal. Like, he traveled around a good bit, and did various things. But one of the interesting things about when he was growing up, his father was a school teacher, but his parents made sure that he didn't speak the Welsh language. They didn't want him to speak the Welsh language because they wanted him to kind of get on in English. So he didn't really know the Welsh language, but when you listen to his voice, he's an extraordinary voice. Like, I don't know where he got it from, but I mean, it's extraordinary. Yeah. He went into journalism first, and then into radio and things, and he worked alongside the Irish poet Louis MacNeice for the BBC, And yeah, his voice is brilliant on the radio. That kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's actually, yeah, in the book I bought, that's there as well.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes,
My eye.
this one. Yeah,
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Portrait of the Artist of the Young Dog.
this one also says in the introduction that this was his last major work, final version completed and performed in New York in 1953, barely a week before he died at the age of 39.
This was his
Exactly.
final under Milkwood
Yeah.
was his final.
His
He
last
was
major
still writing. He was still writing it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was first ever performance was in New York City, and Dylan Thomas did the narration, and that's what the recorded version is on Caedmon Records. If you ever have, I've got the old LP of that.
You should be able to get it online, Bill.
Yeah, I know you. I know you
what-
can.
Is that what you were you?
That's what I was
sent
trying
me
to
the
send
link
to you,
to? Okay.
Duncan. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try it again. I'll try it
Okay.
again. I tried each
I'll have a
one.
look and make sure that I had given you the right reference as well.
He was
Okay.
you talk about him not being popular. He was extremely popular in the United States. He did,
Yeah.
he did 4, I think, American tours, and he would sell out college appearances all the time. I mean, he traveled all over. It was pretty grueling, but it was a way for him to make some money too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
He used to do
he used to
readings.
he'd do readings, public readings. And then he would hang out at the White Horse Tavern in New York City, where he did a lot of his drinking with
Yeah.
a number of other.
Ne'er do well.
And he died I think he didn't die, but he got sick and collapsed at the Chelsea Hotel. That's where he was staying.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The notorious Chelsea Hotel. I believe, did he not die of pneumonia? I mean, the problem was that
Yeah.
he wouldn't take care of himself, and he kept
Yeah.
on drinking
That's what
despite the
that's what
fact that
said.
he was very ill with pneumonia. And of course, pneumonia will take you out.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he fell into a coma.
Mhm.
oh.
Yeah.
I
well,
read
great
of
that
the,
They brought
The
his body
person
back
who-
to Wales for interment, which was good. Sorry, Anne.
oh no, I was going to say, I read some time ago, there was a film, a coverage of his trip to New York, and the person who invited him to host him for one of those tours was he was incorrigible. He just kept drinking. He couldn't get him to make any sense. He couldn't present him
Yeah.
to people. He would drive a car and just go crazy with the speed of the thing. And that was a lifestyle at the end.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, well, that happened. I mean, this is one of the tragic story of Jack Kerouac, really. Was
Yeah.
also, I really like Jack Kerouac's work, but I do wrestle with his alcoholism on a
Mm.
regular basis.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't see Kerouac as being. Well, I don't know. Let's not
That's
talk about
fine.
Kerouac.
You
We're-
don't
Let's
we're
even
not
talk-
have
go
to
there.
say
I
another
think-
word. I know exactly what you're
don't-
not saying.
Can't stand him.
Right.
Well,
But I did see- I
how
did
about
s-
Delmore Schwartz? Delmore Schwartz.
Delmore Schwartz. Yeah.
The San Francisco Public Library had Kerouac's On the Road manuscript, and what it was is pieces of paper that were glued together
On a
in
roll.
one long scroll. The whole
Mhm.
thing was a
Mhm.
scroll. It
Mhm.
could never be seen, opened entirely. It's interesting.
He must have seen himself in parallel with the composer of the Bayeux Tapestry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, there's a connection I hadn't thought of before.
now that's come up with. I'm doing a study on women's legal rights in England in the Victorian era, and the
Okay.
woman and the Bayeux Tapestry. There's like 600 men's names and 4 or 5 women, all of whom are being raped or misused.
It's
But for me-
unfortunate. It's unfortunate that at least in America, I'm not, maybe it's true everywhere, but people get hung up on the, like with Brendan Behan or with Dylan Thomas. It's all about the drink.
Yeah.
And with William Burroughs, William Burroughs came to Kent State once. I got to meet him and talk to him. He was a brilliant man, a great conversation.
Mhm.
But all of these younger students at Kent State, all they wanted to talk about was drugs. All they wanted to talk
Yeah.
about was his drug
Right.
experience. And all people rave about Charles Bukowski, but it's all because he's such a drunkard. You know, they can't. It's too bad because the work, Dylan Thomas in particular, is brilliant poet.
Yeah.
Except I would say he almost ruined, or maybe did ruin single-handedly, public readings of poetry in the United States, because ever after, everybody at a public reading has to intone their poems a la Dylan Thomas. I mean, they can't speak in their own voice. They have to have this put on Dylan Thomasy presentation, which drives me crazy.
Well, as overly dramatic, as exaggerated. With
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have trouble with a lot of works that are produced because who was it? Oh yeah, even Shakespeare. I mean, some of the Shakespeare productions drive me crazy because it's all got to be they exaggerated and they add music to it. And I'm kind of going, for my taste, I kind of like things plain and simple.
Yeah.
For the most
original.
part.
Let the words speak.
Yeah.
They put music with everything nowadays.
Yeah, I always have trouble sharing a lot of stuff, or I share it and I say, turn off the sound before you watch this.
Oh.
I can't, yeah, it's not to do with what we're talking about, but I can't even hear a weather forecast now because there's music behind it. And I
Really?
I can't concentrate. You're trying to pick up.
They put music behind your weather
a little
reports?
sound going on, a little, presumably, I don't know, it must come from television, somewhere, and it's gone on radio. Is that the Kerouac? There's a new book about Kerouac, King of the Road. That's Times Literary Supplement 3 weeks ago. It's a review of Becoming Kerouac, a writer in his time.
Okay, Becoming Kerouac. I'll tell you a little story. Actually, my first wife, mother, lived in Mill Valley, California. And we went out there. We went out there a number of times and we stayed there. And over time, I began to realize that the actual place where we were living was where Kerouac and Gary Snyder lived for a time. And that the last time I went out there was during a COVID break a couple of years ago. And I went to visit the son who had kind of inherited the place, my ex-mother-in-law's son. And we went walking around and, there was still the foundation there. And then I did some internet searching and some letter writing that would refer to what was going on at that time. Yeah. So
it's kind of interesting. You get a sort of a strange feeling when you do that, don't you? When you go to somewhere that you know what happened there. I don't want to talk about James Joyce, but there's a house in Bray where Joyce lived that I go to every year just to bring a few people there. And I get that it's where the dead, not the Christmas dinner row is in Portrait. It's just, we were there, Tom.
Yeah.
And it's really strange to be in a place where something happened. They're all gone now.
Yeah.
Sort of what did it feel like on the day? And it's sort of a strange feeling. Maybe it's just me. I found the dreams in tonight reading, people. I don't know how a man in his 30s knew that you can sometimes dream of the dead, Because it's only in recent years I've begun to dream of people who are nowhere dead. Because it's only in recent years I have a sufficient cast, to
Mhm,
but here he is,
Aw.
a man in his 30s, and he's writing it. So it's really spooky.
Well, this is a lot of fun to read, and I
Yeah.
thought everyone did a marvelously good job of it. And I would like to get some feedback of if I don't know what you saw on your screen, but I had the share screen up there and I was trying to follow along. And then each reader, you would pop up in a little thing up in the upper right-hand corner. And I thought maybe with a little bit of practice that's actually a pretty interesting technique for working with particularly things like poetry or dramatic poetry, that sort of thing. But, that's just my opinion. So if anybody has any feedback on that, I mean,
I certainly, just to give you a quick, like I could see everything, like, and even the chat list didn't ever disappear. You could just chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll be posting this in the next day or two. And I'm pretty sure that the Facebook the YouTube live version will be from my perspective, meaning you'll see the poem on the screen and then each reader up in the upper right-hand corner.
Very hard,
So
very hard
those
to
of
keep tracking it. That's, requires you to concentrate for a very long time.
Yeah, but I realized after a while I didn't have to track it perfectly. I just had to give an indication every once in a while. And I learned that at first I started off by actually trying to highlight it, and then I realized if I kept my cursor just a little bit outside the line, it would be an arrow.
Yeah.
So, no, just playing. Anyway, those of you who are on Facebook, if you get a chance, take a look at it and give me some feedback.
Okay.
Personally, I prefer being able to see everybody, but
Mhm.
they're not
Well, then-
reading from that text.
I could still see everybody.
Yeah, but everybody at once.
Yeah, you like the gallery view.
Yeah, the gallery
Yeah.
view.
I wasn't able to get a copy of the book. I mean, I tried, or the play, I should say. I tried, but is there anybody else that needs the split screen with? Because I'll try.
I'm reading from the Gutenberg version
Okay.
online.
Okay.
Maybe Katrina, with the difficulty of getting some of these books, it's not like when we do the Joyce or you're not part of the Dante group, but the Dante, where we've all got the books. Maybe we're going to have to make that concession. I prefer the gallery too, but in order to get the book to people, maybe we have to do it that way.
Yeah, I can understand that. Although I've been able to find everything that we've read without any.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
mean, but sometimes it takes a little while.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. When you were looking at your screen today during the reading, were you seeing a gallery view or just a speaker view?
No, I had a strip,
reading
but not
page, and
everybody.
then
Little
about
strip,
four-
yeah.
Strip.
Yeah,
Yes.
4 little
Yeah.
pictures on the side and then the text.
Yeah. So it's off to the right of the text.
Yeah.
It's just a strip, like a movie, a film.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking
but,
about. I
but
know what you're talking about.
it would constantly refresh to the person speaking. But if you
Yeah.
wanted everyone, you could click on it and get the others.
You could,
Yes.
but I'm just saying I preferred with this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's bigger. It's easier to.
And it's more more
Feels-
friendly.
Feels like
Yeah, okay. Okay. Well,
I
that's
don't know
why
what
I'm
it is
asking.
about being able to see the people, but it certainly feels like a group when you have the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If it's of any help to anybody, I just got my copy last week, and it's a 2024 edition from Penguin, and it's at penguin.co.uk Vintage Classics, with an introduction by Griff Rhys-Jones, which is interesting.
Mhm.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Can I just pick up a point that Bill's still here? Yeah. The problem with the gallery is your pictures move around on my screen, so I'm
Yeah.
never sure where to find people. Bill, you raised the point, and others did, about the drunkenness or personality problems of some of the people we read. And certainly Charlotte Bronte, in her preface to Jane Eyre, I think it is, talks about taking a pen name because of the chastisement, she puts it, of the weapon of personality. And since we're all pretty much all of us are Ulysses people too, involved in Ulysses people. I mean, to me, it took us back to Scylla and Charybdis. And I'm wondering if maybe I'm leaning towards the side of AE, who said, that we have to be really careful about the personality. And I think I've often thought, as we've read through that chapter where there's splitting the fine hairs of split ends about Shakespeare's personality, that in some ways it's maybe a blessing we don't know too much about it, because it really forces us to focus on the plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas you can,
Good point.
whereas you can get to the point where, people are making something about when Dickens went to the washroom or something, and you're going, maybe not,
Yeah.
So Bill, I just want to say, like, I really take your point that we are in danger of missing beautiful art because of things that the author did. And I can only say, maybe as my final point, that they now play Wagner in Jerusalem.
Right.
And that really says something.
Wow.
If they play Wagner
Wow.
in Jerusalem. But I think what it says is that the people in that community have come to the point where they can appreciate his brilliant art and forget, what an asshole he was in real life.
And his succeeding
Or how he was-
family.
how his work was misused and
Yes, indeed.
appropriated, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a good point, Bill.
Interesting on that, Dave, because on that documentary I mentioned, Kathleen, his wife, describes Dylan as trying to look like a poet, always trying to look like and be a poet, which is a terrible.
That's the danger of reading.
Danger,
But
yeah.
it's going to be a problem when we read My Brother's Keeper, because that's Stan's view of his brother, and it's not truth. It's just his view, and he's very he has very strong opinions about James
Yep.
as a person.
Even the title tells you where he stands, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Am I my brother's keeper? You bet I was, So it's
Yeah, I think the argument that it's in the work is always the best argument. That just read, especially with Joyce. Just read him. You don't need to know every last detail about his biography and his life and what he did in Paris and with whom, and I think people can easily get bogged down in all that, and then forget the work itself, and that's the crime or the danger, I would say.
Right. Thanks, Bill. And I think the thing that we have to keep in mind, I'm underlining your point, is that the details from the biography are interesting, their texture, but we only care about those details because of the brilliant work.
Right.
Right. We wouldn't be interested in James Joyce if he hadn't written Dubliners and Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. And that's the only reason really why his life becomes interesting. But it's those magnificent works of art.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you and Bill keep me in line, because
we all do it. We all talk about their lives. There's no keeping in line, because it is fascinating. It's just, I think we're just trying to rejig things so that we're
is not life? Is not life constantly rebalancing?
Sure,
of whatever we're focused on. It's a rebalancing and trying to keep from veering off in some direction too far, or but as they say, if you don't go too far, how do you know you went too far?
It's a natural thing. If you find an author that you really love, you love their work, you want to know more about them, you want to find out more about them as people, and so you read a biography and all that. But I think if the work cannot stand on its own without biographical background information, it's not of very much value, I don't think.
I got to go, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah,
Okay.
Same
All right,
here. I've
well-
got to go. Thank you. That
All
was
right,
great.
well,
Thank you.
yeah,
It was
all right,
wonderful.
we'll gather next Monday for more.
Yeah,
Okay.
Great,
Mhm.
great reading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great,
And
lots of
just a
fun.
reminder, I'm going to sign on 20 minutes early next week.
Okay.
If you're interested in looking at the some of the parts of the story, A Mother.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay.